Maybe. And we're live. Good day, Whiskey brothers, sisters. We're honored to have you, the viewer, and our panel with us tonight. Welcome. My name's Dolph. I'm the president of the Alberta Scotch Society and the founder of the Whisky Book Club, and I am your host tonight. For those of you that are new to us, I'll explain a little bit what we're about. We're a group of whiskey geeks that love to share a dram and share our passion for reading, mostly about whiskey and whiskey-related activities. The choice of our present tome, our third book, was inspired initially, this one right here, by our sense of adventure and my long-held desire to do the Whiskey Trail in Scotland or the Bourbon Trail with our friends down south. Canada has so much history, so much whiskey. Why not do our very own Whiskey Bourbon Trail? But we're going to call it a Canadian Whisky Journey. So, thanks to Blair and David's tour guide book, this one right here with loads of pictures, which is good for me. I'm a visual guy. It's got maps, got directions, got suggestions, got checklists. It's got everything. We have, because of this book, the direction we need, the inside track to the distilleries we crave. And that distillery is Distillery Fils du Roi right now in Petit-Pacville, New Brunswick. Davin and Blair will indeed be our spirits guides on this journey across this vast, beautiful country of ours. So when we're done, please stick around as we continue this journey with the after dram. It's a more relaxed atmosphere, and it starts 5 minutes after this broadcast. So let's start our roundtable introductions with our names, our other platform handles, as well as what you have prepared and as your highlighted dram tonight. Mine's going to be this one, New Ireland whiskey. But I think there's only two other ones with that in there. So we have a wide range of drinks out here tonight. We'll start with Davin Blair, and we'll continue with our special guest, Sebastien, and then Sheila, and then back to me. How's that sound? Davin, you're up.
Hi, Davin de Kergommeaux. I'm one of the authors of this definitive guide to Canadian distilleries, which is taking us across the country. Tonight, I've got 5 Fils du Roi whiskeys in front of me. Here's a sample of single malt called Le Richelieu International, which a great single malt, and got another one here too, Congrès Mondial Acadienne 2019. I guess that's 2019. And so 5 of them, so that's what I'll be drinking tonight. Take care. On to you, Blair.
Blair Phillips, co-author of the Definitive Guide to Canadian Distilleries, and I am enjoying some New Ireland whiskey, spelled with an E.
And we'll talk about that later. Why it's with.
Just notice it's in a Dewar's glass for some stupid reason, but
I never noticed. You're good.
Yeah.
I'm Sebastien Roy from Distillery Fils-du-Roi in Petit-Pacville, and I'm trying a little bit again of New Ireland.
All right. Excellent. And Sheila. Nope, she's muted.
I am muted because I have very loud dogs tonight. I have Drew here to wrestle them for me. So I too am drinking the New Ireland tonight. So my little glass. And I have my lovely book. And I am on tonight because I get to visit home. So this lovely Distillery du Roi, is in my home province of New Brunswick. So I get to stop down and visit my mom in St. John before heading up to Pacville in order to visit the distillery on this visit.
And thank you very much. It's a homecoming for you. That's perfect. I'm Dolph. I'm the president of Alberta Scotch Society. I said it before, and I am enjoying my New Ireland. We're going to talk about why it's called New Ireland and why it's whiskey with an E as well. But here, I've got some pictures. I got lots of things to show us right now. So we're in week 12, but I'll put this on as I say it. We're in week 12 of our Canadian Whisky Journey. We're coming from Concord, Ontario, where we were with Still Waters, and we spent 14 hours driving through Montreal, Quebec, make our way to Distillery Fils du Roi in Petit-Pacville, New Brunswick. I'm going back and forth from English to French. I'm messing myself up. Nouveau Brunswick or New Brunswick, whichever one it is, I think you'll figure it out. And just so you can see where it is in relationship to the other provinces, right there, and then a little bit closer, and then fully very close right there. That's where they are. So by water sources. And how far away are you, Sebastien, from the ocean?
It would be, we're very close to it. We would be probably, I would say 4 hours in boat.
4. Okay. All right. I thought you were closer. I couldn't. I'm missing the water right now. I'm missing the
Boat.
ocean or something. I get in these moods every once in a while where I want to see them. So let's start. And I still got more pictures to put up here. And right here. So that's Sebastien, and that's your mom, Ziane, correct?
Yes, that's it.
All right. The co-owners, also with your brother, right there.
Jonathan and Hélène, his partner.
Yeah, done. Okay. And let's get my picture back. Good. Let's get my picture banner right there. There. That's what I want. So, Sebastien, I got this from your website. I'll put this on in a second. And so this is a quote directly from the website. It was during a family reunion in Caraquet in 2011 that the idea of starting a distillery was launched. The following year, Distillerie Phillips-Fils was born. Sebastien and his mother Ziane began the development of two first products. So Gin Thuya and Absinthe La Courailleuse. These were obviously the right choices because they're still on sale.
Yes.
They are both still on sale, right? I know
Yes.
the gin is. And are they your top sellers, Sebastien?
I would say absinthe is particular. So gin, vodka, whiskey, and rum. We use molasses from a company that have been here in New Brunswick since 1897, Crosby. That probably Sheila will know. It's in St. John.
Yeah.
Those are our top seller for spirits. So absinthe it's there, but it's niche. It's not something that people know.
It was really important to you, though, to start with it. You went to Prague, correct?
Yes.
Why did you go to Prague? Did this was just like out of university, you wanted to go for a trip? Is that was?
Oh no, we were a beer hunter for probably 10 years. Probably we started in 1999, and we had a meeting every Wednesday, and there were not a lot of microbrewery in Canada in general. So we started to travel in Canada, in Maine, in the United States, in Boston. And then we wanted more. So then north of France, Belgium, Germany, and so on. So we wanted to have a Schwartz beer that is a style from Czech Republic. So we were in a trip for a month in Germany. We stopped there, but we wanted to change for something else than beer. We drink beer every day. So we tried the absinthe, and I completely fall in love with that spirit.
Okay. And does a Prague absinthe taste different from a French absinthe?
At that time, it was in 2007. Absinthe was illegal in Europe, except in the Czech Republic and Spain.
Okay.
So we were there just to see what it tastes like because I never had it. So I was not able to see a difference at that time. But it was stronger in Tujon, what is illegal in Europe. Czech Republic, they had no law, so it was very high and very, very different absinthe.
And a good place to be for a young man, I think.
Yes, especially at Pilsen, where they have the Pilsner come from. It was very nice to try it from the local water.
Oh, all right. Fantastic. And I'd like to try some. You know what? I've had absinthe here for a while. I still haven't tried it because I need to prepare it properly. I know you have to melt it over the cube and then put it over. I need to watch a YouTube video and just figure that out in a second. So I'll do that. Here's another thing from your site, if I may. It says, in 2015, a second distillery Roy opened in Quebec. So this is your brothers. It'll be led by Jonathan Roy, Sebastien's brother. And this allows flagship products to cross the border and allow new products to emerge. So first of all, two questions for you. Whose idea was this? And what's your brother's background? So just start with that if I could.
At the beginning, when we meet me and my mother to open Distillerie Fils du Roi, we asked my brothers, sisters, father, family if they wanted to join, but it was a little bit weird. So no one really wanted to be part of that project except me and my mother. But eventually, it didn't took time that it started to grow, and I think it inspired my brother. So eventually, in 2015, he wanted to be part of that, but not to live where he is now with his family in close to Rivière-du-Loup. So that's where he spoke with us and wanted to start a distillery. We rented a little place and we did that for a few years. In 2019, we have construct a building with agricultural land around. So now he is very happy to grow and transform his product with his partner Hélène.
All right.
And that's how it happened. So he wanted to do the passion. His background was he was a programmer analyst. So he was working for a big pig mouse company in Rivière-du-Loup, and he changed to do spirits. All the product made in New Brunswick stay in New Brunswick. All the product made in Quebec are in Quebec. So we cannot cross the invisible line. It's very difficult because of the monopoly for spirit for each province. It's like worse than another country. It's difficult. Yeah. So that's why you have to produce on site. And me, I can produce the same product on my site in New Brunswick, and then we're fine.
Okay. Have you tried both the same products, the exact same product in both places? Because I'm wondering if it tastes different.
It tastes different. First of all, the water. We don't have the same water, and that have an effect. The water in Petit Paquetville have more mineral, so it gives another taste. The other thing, you don't have my notes, so you have to prepare it differently. So it is different, but we embrace it because that is craft. It depends on your location and your judgment.
That's a perfect answer for an older brother, right? Because he just doesn't have my skills.
That's not what I said, but a little bit.
No. And here it is. There's the little picture. So that's where they are. And more specifically, right there. So that's a nice picture. And you said this is him and his partner.
Yes.
And they're full partners with you and your mother. Is that correct? So it's like full partners?
Okay. Full partner for the distillery in Quebec. For the distillery in New Brunswick is only me, my mother, and a little bit my father.
Oh, good. Get everyone involved. It's good. But I think you told me this previously. He's got more of a passion for farming than he does for the distilling. That's where his kind of center is.
Just go check his Facebook. His tractor is very, very often in the picture. He like to take the land, to move it, then to plant, then to harvest, and then to transform. That is his passion. So he likes to grow a lot of botanics.
Okay, good. That's nice to hear. And is it working out the way you wanted it? Is with both distilleries, the two provinces, or were you picturing something different? Were you picturing moving things from one to the other?
During the pandemic, I have to say everything is upside down. But normally, yes, it worked well, and I would say for both distilleries, it's going very, very well. So we had to grow. We have to add more equipment. We're trying to stay small, but to add small equipment, especially in Quebec. They have a population of close to 8 million population. So just to provide for that province is a big task. From New Brunswick, we are the size of the city of Quebec, 750,000. So I need more different products to be able to live from my passion. So I would say, yes, it's going well.
All right, good. I'm glad. Davin and Blair, I'm going to quote this right here. So this is an article you guys had, the Road de l'Acadie, and it was in which magazine? Was it in Whiskey Magazine? It was, and it's right there. That's the magazine. So I'm quoting this quite a bit because I got a lot of information from that one. I love the introduction used to the article. So it says, and I've got someone here. No, the road ended. There we go. So the road ended suddenly at the steps of the towering twin-spired Saint-Augustin Church in the small peninsula town of Paquetville, Canada. Davin wasn't here to speak spiritual guidance. but he sure could have used some. That's the part I like the most. He'd lost his way while searching for an even tinier northern New Brunswick town called Petit-Paqueteville, where devout whiskey maker Sebastien Roy plies his trade. So why I love it, one, is because we don't know who wrote. So in this book, Sebastien, Davin and Blair have told us that they've written intermittently one and the other, and we shouldn't be able to tell who's written what part. But in that part of the article, we can tell it's at least obvious that Blair wrote that part. So I like knowing something like that. So that's the first one. Two, it shows us that they're both up for a lot of adventures. So let's go to Davin and Blair. What was the distillery like when you got there? Because you both obviously went there, and you didn't go to a lot of them together, or of the ones we've already talked about. This is one you both saw. So I'd like to get your impressions, please, gentlemen.
Okay, so Davin actually was the one that went to this distillery. I didn't get to go. And that introduction, believe it or not, I don't know who wrote that, because Davin and I, we had this big story for Whiskey Magazine, and we wanted to feature as much of Sebastien as physically possible. So we had this big bloated introduction that we just kept chipping away at until we got that little tight phrase, that tight paragraph. So I don't think I actually wrote that. I think it was once again one of those.
Davin writing it for himself.
No, it was a communal effort that we just
we
passed it back and forth about 50 times until we had it right.
Well, I was kind of happy, almost happy I knew something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you, though. But tell me your impressions.
Okay. It's kind of cool passing work back and forth like that, because I send Blair something that I'm embarrassed about. It's so bad, and he turns it into something quite nice, and then I work on it a bit than he does, and we gradually turn it into something that we're both happy with. And I think it's the same with Blair. He sends down stuff, and when I send it back to him, it's full of red, so many changes. But in the end, yeah, it's like we both contribute to every piece. Now, that distillery, first of all, finding it is not quite as easy as you might think, because I turned right at that church, and then I forgot to turn left a little bit further down. So I ended up calling Sebastien and saying, where am I? And he says, well, you're just around the corner from where we are. But I had to backtrack and go up and found it. The distillery was wonderful. Now, I think it has expanded a little bit even since then. But it's a tiny little shop that you enter through, which has some cheese and some different products, and I think some beer and spirits and so on the wall. But it's really quite narrow. You walk in the door, and there's a cash register at the end, and it's like the little entranceway to a house. Then you turn right and go into the distillery, and wow, there are these two wonderful old Portuguese stills that, and they're the old-fashioned kind, like the real old. Oh, you see them behind Sebastien on the right there. And you see the head is on the ground, and the still has no top on it. He takes that head off, and he pastes it on with rye flour, makes paste. But if you go back towards us and in front of Sebastien, on the left, there's this big area that's full of barrels. It's got all these barrels there. It's got rye and peated rye and single malt, and he's got the date on it when he's going to bottle it for some special Acadian event. And it's really, really cool. Sometimes it's like 15 or 20 years in the future this has been set aside for. And you go back to the right, and there's quite a sizable brewery there where they are brewing beer. And the place, when you go into that distillery, it has a combination of smells of maturing spirits, but you can smell the fresh malt, and it's truly a wonderful experience. And as animated and as exciting as Sebastien is when he's telling you about these things, and really, with his arms going and things like this, you go to the shop, and there's his mother, Deanne, who I don't think she speaks one word of English, but she does. I don't know what's, and she's very calm, and you almost feel like you're communicating with her. When I left, she gave me a little block of cheese, which Sebastien just told me they put beer in it. So it's really quite a great experience. I would highly recommend it for people who are in that area. And I forget how long it took me to get there from Fredericton. I think it's a 5-hour drive if you get lost, and it was well worth the drive. My only regret is I spent 10 hours on the road and 2 hours at the distillery. But I had an event I was doing that night in Fredericton, so I just didn't have any spare time. But Sebastien, you have a wonderful place, and you're truly an animated character. I mean, it's like you're so passionate. It's indescribable, and it always makes me excited telling people about your distillery. And you top it off by having one product after another that I really like. And I hope, Dolph, before we go off, Blair gets the chance to talk about Sebastien's bagasse, because we had a 5-page feature on this bagasse in Whiskey Magazine 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
It's really something. That whole adventure, it was really exciting. But anyway, Sebastien, I appreciated your hospitality and I loved your spirits.
Oh, thank you.
That's quite the introduction to you there, Sebastien.
Yes.
A lot of love. That's good. Sheila, you're from New Brunswick. Have you ever been or close to Peckett or Pittspeckavid?
I would have been. I was a Highland dancer, so my parents took me all the way up through there, and then we had a very close friend of the family who was up in Campbellton, Men's Mountain, and then we also had family up in
here. If I put the map up, it might help.
Just across the river in Metapedia, Baie-Comeau areas as well. So we would have been up in, not necessarily in the Petit-Paqueville, but we would have been. Let me see. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to get really close. When you had the map up, I was trying to get really close so I could see the map, and then you took the map away.
But now you will be going, will you not? Next time you go home to see Mom, it's the perfect place to go.
It's gonna be a while, actually. That was my conversation with Mom a couple of days ago. It's because they've locked down the province. They've actually
they're open up to other maritime provinces, though. Yeah.
But not to me, because I'm in Alberta. So for me to go home, I can't quarantine in my mom's home. So for me to go home, I have to quarantine somewhere else before I could actually see my mom. So I have to do a 14-day quarantine in like a hotel or somewhere else.
And they're not going to break that Atlantic bubble for us Edmontonians, because we are a hot zone here right now in Edmonton.
Because we are just a hot zone right now. So yeah. So it'll be a while because
well, it's well.
So it's nice to talk about getting to do this travel.
You will one day.
It's only a few more hours to go to the other place too.
Oh, it's not. It's a nothing drive, because you think about it. Like we just did a drive up to a couple of distilleries north to Grand.
Using your book.
Just recently, using your book.
Yeah.
So if we'll do that. That drive is less than the drive to Petit-Paqueville from St. John. So yeah, we would make that drive easily.
And Davin, just to show you how much they like the book, they did that on their 25th wedding anniversary. They did the tour using the book going up. That's pretty cool. So, and
I'm flattered.
Oh, and you should be. Way to go, Blair and Davin. But I'm going to talk about your book again for a quick second. You both, in your book and the article, Davin and Blair, you refer to Sebastien's alembic pot stills behind you. So is that on his right hand or on his left hand?
It's on his left hand.
On his left.
I think there's a little one back behind him on the other side. But the one that we're really impressed with is the one that comes apart into two pieces. There are two of those that come apart into two pieces.
And that's the cone, correct?
Yeah, that's the head of the still. Yeah. That's
the head of it that goes on top. What you said in the article as well, and the book, finishing off with Thomas. Sorry, I'll read the whole thing. The head being glued in place using rye flour paste, which you just said, and you finishing off with Thomas Molson would be proud in this article. This is how the Upper Canadian whiskey maker rolled in 1821. So, Davin, can you just talk about that, just the history right there? Because I know you love the history, and we can go back to this book, and you and I talked about this when we did that book. Yeah. But can you give us a quick 2-minute history of how they would have used stills like that in 1821?
Yeah. Thomas's father, John Molson, bought a rum still that was much like that one that Sebastien has behind him, and then he bought it, in 1800 or something like that. And then he ran one run and didn't use it again. And about 20 years later, Thomas picked it up. His son Thomas picked it up and started making whiskey. And they made a lot of whiskey. Molson's, they're known for their beer now, but they were big whiskey makers in Montreal at the time. And they had that still. And it's interesting because I read the notes in his own handwriting saying, and original, not a copy, saying how he would then make a paste with rye flour and put it on to the cauldron, and then he would glue the head right onto the still. So when I walked into Fils du Roi and saw that still there, I instantly thought of Thomas Molson, who was I think the first known commercial whiskey distiller in Canada, at least that have survived. There were a few others before that who sold in the Montreal area, but yeah. So I was very impressed, and then to learn he had them made in Portugal. It's really cool.
Sebastien, what's the advantage of having that still then? Is it just easier to clean, easier to work with, or it's just one of the only ones you could get at that time? Got to be something.
It's not easy to clean. It's not as efficient as the new still. Yeah. But what I wanted is the coil. The coil produced a lot of oil, and you probably can taste it on the whiskey. It's a very, very oily whiskey. Yes. And any of my spirit, because of the technique used, produce oil, and oil make the product to last very long. And that's what I want. I want a spirit that when you try it, it stays. It evolves.
It's a great mouthfeel and a longer finish. I agree. It's fantastic.
Because of the equipment.
Okay, good. Blair, can you think of any other distilleries out your way that would have a still like this, something like it?
The only one I can think of is in Prince Edward Island, Matos Winery and Distillery. They make a traditional Portuguese-style grappa called Bagacau or something like that. Yeah, Jim Matos is from the Azores Islands in Portugal, and that's how he was brought up making spirits in Portugal, was with the Olympic still, very similar to that one, but I think theirs is a bit smaller in PEI.
All right, Sebastien, how did you learn how to use it? Because it's pretty hard to get that information. You probably looked up as much as you could, but how much was available?
Always have been autodidact, so I start something and I make big error, and sometimes it's very big errors, but the important is not to do it again and to learn from it. Yes. Then I practice, and eventually I made something that I found decent because I was able to drink it, and I'm very picky. So that's where I said I learned it. But it was autodidact. From everything I do, I like to try it and make errors.
Kind of a not really technical question, but how do you do this? So let's say you tried something with the still, it didn't come out to your taste. Would you redistill the distillate, or would you start at the beginning and redistill the beer, the wash? Because if you distill the distillate, I don't know if you fix it. Do you know what I mean? Do you have to go back to the beginning, or can you fix once you already have a distill?
It's always an individual decision depending what you're doing. But sometimes if it's really bad, and it happens rarely, but it could happen, then it can become hand sanitizer at the worst case scenario. But normally it's very rare that I make gigantic error that is not good. Normally you will redistill it again. I use also UV from the sun, so that will destroy a lot of fused alcohol, or it will neutralize oils and it destroy everything. So it will become close to neutral. If not, I can add water and distill it again, and normally it will work. I'm starting to be an expert in troubleshooting because of the way I'm learning.
So 9 years you've been using the still?
Oh, a little bit more than that, but they were smaller at the beginning. I would say we're probably 12 years with spirits. Nice. Before it was beer. I own a little nano brewery since 2004. In 2011, I started the spirit, but I had distilled since 2009.
Well, let's go back to the microbrewery, because Davin and Blair both refer to a brewery that you started with a microbiologist in 2000. Was it
2004.
2004?
Yes.
What was the distillery called?
It is not a distillery. It was a brewery. It was
Sorry.
Acadie.
Yes. Yeah.
Acadie Brew. And it still exists. It's still a nano brewery
Okay.
that is now in Moncton. It's Patrice that owned it. We started that because we were, as I said, beer hunter. We were passionate about beer. I was passionate about flavor. I wanted to discover how to produce everything that is alcohol. And at that time, so we were brewing in this basement, and eventually we moved to have a real commercial brewery that was registered with Revenu Canada and the liquor and a real thing, but tiny. So that was my first practice. Patrice teach me a lot about the yeast and the very small organisms that how it prosper, what it produce when it's stressed, how to stress it to produce something. It's very complex. I'm sure someone can have a PhD just on yeast. It's like the chemical reaction in water when you try to change the pH is very complex, and it really fascinates me. And I'm still learning from. We started. We built another annex, the malt house, and inside there's a lab, and that lab will produce our own yeast. So I'm learning more than ever on yeast, and even when you think you know everything, there's something else you can learn from it.
Perfect. And when you had your brewery to start, did you have a focus? Were you better at one type of beer than another? Was it the very dark, heavy Doppelbocks? And did you love those, or lighter lagers, pilsners? Did you have a specialty?
At that time, we were not fussy because there was not a lot of nano brewery or micro breweries. So just to brew beer was something very marginal and special.
Okay.
There was not a lot of microbrewery here. It was very, very rare. So we had that passion just to produce pale ale and IPAs, and we were starting to like it. It was also at that time we were in love with Belgian style beer, a sweet beer. So trying to produce triple and the basic. It was very the basic that we were very, very, very happy just to produce something that was drinkable, and we learn and he's still now doing a lot of very strange style like Wissen built a German style Wissen from Berlin Weiss. Sorry,
Berlin Weiss. Okay, I just made a Martin yesterday, so I'm good. That's excellent. However, I want to know, is there something you learned from brewing that you brought over to distilling that you don't think you would have known if you didn't start off in the brewery? Other than possibly the yeast and because you already talked about that. Something
everything, like the temperature of fermentation, the different malts that I can gather to give different flavor to the whiskey. Everything that I know about brewery can be used in distilling whiskey. For gin, I would say you need to have a good base. So you need to produce something. It's corn normally is something very neutral to do your basic alcohol. But still, you learn if there's a problem with the fermentation. It's the same problem for beer, for whiskey, or for any type of alcohol I want to produce. So yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm guessing so. And how you deal with the malt and how you deal with just equipment itself, you probably learned tons just there. Davin and Blair, let's. I've always wanted to ask this to both of you, so it doesn't matter who goes first. But I think this would be a good chance for us to figure out what jobs both of you did before you started writing together. Because I know you wrote and did stuff. See, we've danced around the notion that Davin was a musician, Sebastien, before, and how he took off and he was active in Africa. I'd like to know, though, what they both did. And I'm going to ask you straight out so we can find out now. So if we could start with Blair, though, please, because I haven't heard you talk for a bit.
Before writing,
Before writing.
I was doing music as well. So
Tell us about it, please, a little bit.
oh, I took music in university and played in a bunch of bands. Yeah, it's not that exciting, tell you the truth. Davin has a bit more exciting stories than I do. Let me see. Probably the biggest band we ever played with was the Tragically Hip back when they were starting out. Yeah, it was just playing music in horn sections across Toronto. I mean, in Ottawa and all down through Kingston, Toronto, Montreal, so on and so forth.
What type of music?
Anything from like funky heavy metal stuff to acid jazz to funk, soul, all that kind of stuff.
Were you the front man?
No.
Why not? I'm allowed to ask that. That's a good question. What led to whiskey then? Is it just because you drank a lot when you were playing? What?
No, actually, I didn't drink a lot when I was playing. I discovered whiskey not much later, a few years after that, just hanging out with family that were into it.
Okay.
And I think I told this before, didn't I? I was I was at my uncle's place, and he was pouring me some Glenfarclas, and until then, I wasn't really a big whiskey fan, and I loved this stuff. So I went to the LCBO the next day, and I remember it came in a box. And I just picked up a box at the front cash. It happened to be a 40 Creek double barrel on a fluke. And I had no idea that there'd be a difference between Glenfarclas and 40 Creek. Brought it home and fell in love with it. That's how I discovered Canadian whiskey. And then I guess it was a few years after that when Davin's book came out that that's what really got me going
into whiskey and writing about whiskey. Because how did the writing come about then?
That was out of frustration. I was doing some beer writing, trying to get into travel writing, lifestyle writing, and I was pitching this article about Mill Street in Toronto, all over the place, and finally Drinking Made Easy picked it up, and from that I was doing some beer writing for them. Went to some distilleries in Upper New York State, and then when Davin's book came out, I wrote about that, and through getting to know him, that's when I started to use him as a correspondent for all the Canadian whiskey articles as an expert. So if we wanted quotes, we would go to him, and it blossomed from there. Where then I started doing stuff for Whiskey Magazine with them, and so on and so forth.
And here you are today.
Yeah,
good stuff. Davin, how about you?
Well. To look at me now, you'd never know, but I once had very beautiful hair.
I believe it.
I was not a very good musician, but at that time, looks were important. So I did play with a lot of fairly prominent musicians, but I was never very good. And I knew that. But I started writing on the high school newspaper, and I've always been writing for some kind of magazine or newspaper or something like that, part-time. The career I had before I got into writing full-time, I worked with the Canadian International Development Agency, and we were doing poverty reduction in Africa and in Asia and South America and really all around the world in developing countries, and that was really very revealing. So I've managed to taste some pretty exotic liquors as a result of that. I've tasted fermented horse milk, drank fermented horse milk. I'm not really looking for another opportunity to do that one, but palm wine, in Guyana, fermented with human spit, and in Vietnam, those wines that have the snake in them. And the snake died in the bottle, so that comes to something. And Tanzania, I tasted some. They call it konyagi, which usually does not blind you. And I remember once being in a brewery, a really awesome mealie meal brewery in Zambia, But as I was going around doing this, I was tasting all these things, and wherever I went to Africa, I always transited Amsterdam. I'd spend a few days there a weekend with my buddy, who was he started the Malt Maniacs, and so that's kind of where it all came from. But I've been writing since I was a kid.
All right. So you're exactly where you thought you would be.
Yeah, except a lot later.
I love it. You've been doing it for a while. You're doing well. You're good. I'm going to show us all a movie now for a second. So I got this. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this works out. And we'll see Sebastien, and click on that. Share. All right.
Wonderful.
Isn't that great?
Wow. How do you do that?
By accident completely, because it's not even working for me, Dad.
I think your browser was drinking fermented horse milk.
Maybe.
Yeah. A lot of professionals practice it ahead of time.
Well, I did too, but it looked good a couple minutes ago. I'm stop share. That's not going to work. Forget that. Back to you and back to us, and I'm not sharing anymore. So, Sebastien, you had a role as the volunteer president of the New Brunswick Craft Alcohol Producers Association. You remember that? So you had a video on your own Facebook file. And has that role helped you or the distillery or both in any way? Because you've taken on many different roles, and we see that. And if I can get one of these Facebook things to work later, we'll see more. But has that helped you out?
No.
Nope.
Okay. It takes a lot of my time. Actually, it's not helping, but I'm not doing it for me or for the distillery. I'm doing it for the industry here in New Brunswick. We have been active since the beginning of the association in 2016, and we try many times to make things moving. And now I've been there for many years, so it's my time to give my place to someone else. But before leaving, I wanted to give everything I had. So it was a AGM on June 17 of this year.
Yeah.
And I submitted a strategic plan with steps and what I would do and what were the objectives and where we have to head, and they elect me as president. So then I started to fulfill the plan that I shared to them. And the first thing was to consult the member and ask what they want me to achieve. So then it came with what I call from the beginning the list. And with the list, now I'm doing pressure during election here in New Brunswick for the next government to understand what our industry needs to go to the next level. So what we need is to have an NB first philosophy. So when you're from New Brunswick, there's a monopoly in Canada for each province. So no other country, no other province will take care of our industry than our province. The second is it's a buy NB, and we need to create trades agreement with other province to trade alcohol. So if I'm buying alcohol from Alberta and we have it here in all our store in New Brunswick, can they buy New Brunswick alcohol and send them in all their store? So how can we do trades? And the third one, and it was important for me, we need to have a New Brunswick united. So how we can be as an association responsible socially, and how we can have sustainability and be strong for the future. So those are my 3 acts of development, and each of those acts have a lot of action that need to be fulfilled. And the first one was to ask for the support of the population of New Brunswick, and that was the video.
And it was a great video. So what you have to do is you have to go online, and down below you see all the links. You go to the links, and it's all in the Facebook, because like you said, most of your stuff goes to Facebook. And I think you have some Twitter, some Instagram, but it all feeds from Facebook. So that's your main source where you put the videos and stuff like that. So it's worth a watch. And obviously I thought so, but it's not going to work out. So Sheila, Do we have any questions from the side for any of these gentlemen in front of us?
Oh, we do have a few. Nicole was wondering if outside of your beer experience with the microbrewery, if you had any other mentorship relationships when you were developing into a distillery from the brewery experiences?
Sorry, I didn't understood the question clearly. Sorry.
Sorry, when you were going from your brewery experiences into distilling, if you'd had any other mentor relationships in learning the process of distilling.
No, I look on the internet, but that was not a good plan because often what is on the internet didn't really help. I tried it. I tried and I learned a little bit from books. I look in the internet. I look to a lot of documentation from the 1854, 1860, especially for absinthe. It was well documented how they were doing that, why they were doing it, how to harvest the botanics. So it was pretty me that did some research and try and error.
All right. Okay. And Sheila, next question.
And Dave's wondering if the New Brunswick distillers play well together. Because you're the head of the distillers group, if the distillers don't get along, will work well together, what's the use of spending your time working with the group? So,
so far, we are such a small province that we have to work together. Brewery are the most members in the association. In second place is the distillery. So they start to have more and more distillery member of the association, more than winery and more than cidery or meadery. So we're very, very happy about that. It's something that we see that people can do distillation and have a full-time job. So they can do that during the weekend and be able to work in a real job. For brewing or other activity, it's a little bit more complicated. So that's why I believe we see more and more distillery. It's people that are really passionate and they are doing it because they love to distill it. And we
thank you very much. And
you look confused.
Yeah, let's throw this up here for a second. Oh, what's that?
I just said you looked a little confused. Sorry. Apparently there's a delay on my audio, so.
Oh, I look confused at the best of times, Sheila. But thanks for noticing. I appreciate it. Let's have the picture up here. Blair and Davin explain the significance of the colors of this flag in this picture. But Sebastien, if you could enlighten our viewers as to the name of the flag and the significance, and why do you identify with it so much? Because we haven't talked about your heritage yet. And I'd like to start, if we could.
Yeah, where I come from, we speak French. But we're not from Quebec. We have nothing to do with Quebec. We are Acadian. The Acadian were one of the first French that colonized the Maritimes. And there were a lot of war between the French and British in this region. And at the end, the British won. So in 1755, they saw those people that were speaking French that didn't want to swear to the king of England because they knew another fight would happen and it will change. They were neutral. They were not French. They were not British, but they were speaking French. So the British saw that it was a risk for the colony. So they deport us. They took our ancestor in ship and they start to put the men in a boat, the kids in another, and the women, and they start to bring them a little bit everywhere. So all those Acadians were confused. They had no land, no place to go, so they tried to come back and at least to see their kids and family. So that's where there was a few years where 2/3 of all the Acadians died. They died from different reasons. They were deported and not be able to survive. But some came back, and then they were like type of rebel. They had to hide. If they were catched, the British were taking them to Halifax and they were prisoners. But in 1763, there was the Treaty of Paris, and that allowed us to come back. And that's where, when we came back, our land were already took by British. So we moved close to New Brunswick and upper to Quebec, and that's where the Acadians are from. We speak French, but we're not from Quebec. And in 1884, there was the second big meeting of all the Acadians because we were very suppressed, especially school. They wanted to have them in English, and they wanted the school to be Protestant. And the Acadians were very Catholic, so they were not happy. So they came up with a flag that would unite us, and it's the same color of the French flag, but with a star. So the red represent the sufferer of my ancestor. The white represent the education that we have to provide to our kids about our culture, and the blue represent our hope in survival and to celebrate. And the star is a gathering, but it was a religious. It was the Marie. That's why Ave Maria Stella is the national anthem for Acadia.
Oh, okay.
And we celebrate the Assumption, the 15th of August. That's a big celebration here. Everyone celebrate.
Nice. Good. I like celebrations. Religious usually ends up eating and drinking a lot. Anyways, it's fantastic. I was wondering if you specialized in history at school, because you love your history, apparently, but was that a focus at school, or were you just good at that particular thing?
I was not good at school except in history, and I said, what I will do with history? I'm so not lucky to be good in that domain. But then later on, when I was older, I still remember when I learned about history, it stayed. So when I was with my mother and she said, how will we call that product? Oh, I had like many stories in my head, and then it's how it started. And then she said, what type of botanic? And then I was thinking of history and what was the first botanic the Europeans were using, some botanic, the native, the Mi'kmaq that we had in this region, and Malisit that was close to Sheila region were using. So history became something that I used.
All right. And it's a little bit evident. And well, people can see when they hear you talk, they can tell for sure. Something else that impressed me from Blair and Davin's article is this, and I'll give you the quote. So there. Is it that one? No. Roy also uses his. There we go. Roy. There we go. Roy also uses his spirits to bring significant figures in Acadian history back into the public eye. A lot of the individuals who made their mark on Acadian history, they don't have a face, is what you say. There is no portraits of them or written records of what they look like. So you reanimate these historical Acadian figures with whiskeys that depict what they could have looked like. Just as you did with sugar and water and yeast in a pickle jar, he's bringing them back to life, one name and one barrel at a time. Blair and Davin, I'm going to go back to that because people might not understand the pickle jar reference. Can you talk about that just for a quick second? Sebastien and his pickle jar?
Yeah, I see. Okay, I'm going to try to retell the way Sebastien told it to me. Okay. Before, like long time ago, or not long time ago, I shouldn't age myself, but before internet and computers really exist or are very popular, people had encyclopedias, and that's where you got your information from. So if you're like me, I would flip right to the how to make fireworks section. Yeah. Raise your prosthetic hand if you've done that. And from that I've learned that if you mix saltpeter with sugar, you can make a really killer smoke bomb, right? So, but instead, Sebastien, he went to the fermentation section where he learned that if you mix water, yeast, and sugar, you can create life, basically. So he was doing that. While I was making fireworks, he was making a crude fermentation, and I think that's where he got bitten by that bug. But what he did was he took his mother's pickled egg jar, and that was what he used to start messing around with fermentation at a young age.
Okay. And it turned out well, apparently. Sebastien, if we could look at these liquors, do any of these have the figures that you're talking about, or now or in the past? Because I'm looking what I have here. Because this might be the new ones. Maybe when they first came out, they had different pictures of historical figures on them. So
yeah, the first one is Rocher Malin. It's from my brother, so it's symbol. It's a image from around Rivière-du-Loup. The second one is the Courailleuse, also the Courailleuse in Quebec, but that was one we started with. That was my first product. And Courailleuse in English means promiscuous.
Yeah,
so it's someone that is looking for love, adventure.
That's good.
When I tried the absinthe the first time, I fall in love right away with that spirit, and that's why I named it that way. But I was not yet in producing something with history. The gin Touillat, I used Touillat Occidentalis. It's a botanic because I remembered that Jacques Cartier, during his second trip in 1535, 1536, was trying to go with Instadone. But he was and his crew affected by illness. They were dying. And Monsieur Cartier didn't want to say anything to the native. He was scared they would take advantage of their weakness. But eventually, Monsieur Cartier was describing those symptoms, so he had no other choice. He mentioned it to the native, and they started to boil water with evergreen branch that he described that is cedar, Canadian cedar, but we don't have cedar in America. We only have Touillat. So he said that some of his men that he thought they were dead 2 days after they were ready to continue the exploration. He did a big case, and one of the names for Touillat Occidentalis, it's Arbovida, and that is Jacques Cartier that named that botanic Arbovida, the tree of life, because he owed to that tree, to that branch or that botanic everything, his life, his expedition. So I was very inspired by that. So that's why I made a gin that is flavored with Touillat Occidentalis.
All right.
Arbovida.
And the Grande Héroïne.
That was Jacques Cartier.
The Grande Bagosse.
I know Arbovite, but I did not know that came from Jacques Cartier.
Yeah.
By golly.
The native.
See what happens when we listen to the history, guys? They love it. And the last one, Grande Hermine.
La Grande Hermine, again, is in Quebec. You took the web page of Quebec, and again, in Grande Hermine was one of the name of the ship of Jacques Cartier. And the mix of hot water and the branch, the native call it was the Iroquois Ameba. That's the name for that mix.
See, we could tell how much you love history. We've got those as well. I'm going to get this moving just a little bit, so I'll just show those, and I'll show these guys right there. And
the Bagosse come from France. It's a name that came from bagasse. The bagasse is after they crush the grapes and the branch together, they ferment it, and then they press it, and they just keep the juice. The hard part is called bagasse. And long time ago, the poor people were taking that hard part, mixing it with hot water, and they were calling it the wine of the poor, or bagosse. So for us, the Acadian, we had that terminology that was something that was not great quality. So it can be wine, beer, or spirit. Bagosse can be anything that is made by hand and normally not that great. They're great.
But yours is fantastic.
That was our introduction to Acadian spirits. Blair and I found La Bagosse, and we went on a hunt that eventually took us to Edmundston, where we found people who were distilling Bagosse one day a year.
Yes.
And we met people who had secret stills, and we did, transactions in bars where we could get some of this, trading expensive whiskey for little samples of this Bagosse. It's a story and a half. We should get into that in the after jam. But yours was the one that got into Whiskey magazine.
Oh, good.
I don't know if you ever saw that article, but long ago there was a story about Acadian spirits and smuggling and all that, and your bagasse was used to illustrate that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Sebastien, can we talk about this? We don't have a whole bunch of time left, but I want to get this on for. So first of all, why the E, and why New Ireland, and Davin, if you wanted to, actually, we'll start with you, Davin, really quickly, because you talked about this, or you and Blair, one of you did, in the article saying how we made it, and I think it's 1/11 the beer, but I'll let you talk about it, Blair, Davin, and then Sebastien, the significance of both names, please.
Blair.
Done.
Well, it's a bit of a mistake saying this whiskey is the 1/11 rule. What Sebastien did was that instead of proofing the whiskey with traditional water, he proofed it with the exact same beer that he used to distill the whiskey from.
So he didn't put 1/11 in it, or just
no
less than that, and it doesn't need to be mentioned because it's part of the recipe to start with.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the 1/11 rule.
Okay, got it.
It was purely done as a proofing. I would love to hear why you decided to proof with beer. That's a fascinating story in itself.
That's the real story. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sebastien,
Yeah.
New Ireland, and why whiskey with an E?
Okay, New Ireland. I was again that is a story, and probably Sheila may know it. But in 1784, when the loyalists, the British loyalists, were coming out of what is now United States because they did the revolution, the loyalists that lost everything, their land, their house, that were in Nova Scotia, they didn't even want to be governed by Nova Scotia. They want to have their own government. So they took the county of Sunbury and they separated it from Nova Scotia. And that new province that people wanted to call New Ireland, beside Nova Scotia, very close to New England, everyone was happy. But at that time, the King of England, the King George III, was the King of England, the King of Ireland, and the Prince Elector of Brunswick-Lunenburg, that is now in Germany. He hated the Irish and used his veto because he didn't want to give them any privilege like that. So that's why today we have a German name for our province, New Brunswick. And he wanted to have the capital at our town, that is now St. John, but he was too scared from attack from the American, from the sea. So he preferred a capital inland at Saint-Anne-des-Pays-Bas. The year after, he renowned it in honor of his second son, Frederick, town that became Fredericton. And the farmers that are close to the Acadian are Irish descendant. They were Catholic like us. A lot of our Acadian church have Irish symbol on our church. We were like that. So for respect to my farmers that grow the barley for us to produce whiskey, and just for Irish that have always been around with us, I prefer to call whiskey with a EY at the end.
So just a kinship with your Irish brethren who was a little bit, suppressed at the same time. Just they didn't like us Catholics for some reason. I don't understand why. I don't get it. We're lovely people.
Yes. That was our story. And why I add beer, first of all, I asked the permission to the Food Inspection Agency of Canada if I was able to call the product whiskey, if I don't cut it with water, but with the beer. And they had meetings and they allowed it at the condition that the recipe need to be the same than the whiskey was made from. And we have traceability, so it was easy to find the recipe. So we did the recipe and I cut it with the beer, the same beer. So technically, and I'm not sure I didn't ask, but technically I could call it single malt whiskey because it's only made with malted barley. Okay. And what I wanted to do is to take the best of brewing beer and to bring it to finish that beer so that it would be able to cut the whiskey and add some caramel. Even the yeast, you can see some ester like banana flavor on the nose. That is from the fresh beer. So for me, cutting with water, when we can cut with the beer that have full flavor, we found that it gives them a roundness, interesting taste. And if you don't know, you would not be able to say that it's cut with the beer. It tastes whiskey, but with some addition. That's why.
Wow.
I like to create.
I think it's great. Just 2 quick pictures of the beers. Is it any of these or something very like these that you use to make it?
No, those are all beer to age.
Okay.
Closest would be like Gabriel, but that's a spruce beer. The Acadian were consuming a lot of spruce beer a long time ago. Would be the closest recipe, but no, I really made a recipe for whiskey, the same that I did for the whiskey at the beginning.
Perfect. I like it a lot. Sheila, thoughts? Because I haven't heard from you for a bit, so I want some thoughts on it. Because you tasting,
I like it a lot.
I like it a lot,
I'm not saving any for Drew.
and you shouldn't. He'll get some from me later.
I'll get some eventually, yeah. And then I'm gonna be calling home to see if I can get.
Oh,
some.
good. Do you taste pear? I don't know what type of fruit I'm getting on this. I don't know if it's peach, pear.
I
Is it that you get it?
taste peaches. So,
Okay.
I don't know.
All right.
Peaches and
I
banana.
can go for that.
So.
Blair, you have this in front of you, do you not?
I did.
Oh,
I'll have to-
okay.
Yeah. There wasn't
And I
enough.
should
You
have
needed to
asked
send
before
bigger
there, Blair.
glasses.
Sorry, that's my fault. Just to get. Well, no. Any other tasty notes we want to add, Davin? If you have any memories of it, but yeah, I don't know if it's peach or pear for me because I have a hard time with both of those flavors. But it's a young fruit that I'm getting on it. But I find it enjoyable. It's a little bit sweeter than a single malt. I think that you would have in front of you because you've got 2 single malts in front of you, Davin.
I have 3 single malts in front of me. I have Richelieu International, Congrès Mondial Acadien, 2019 and 1979. And I've also got a rye whiskey, which is my favorite of the batch. And I've got some single malt spirit, which I have to say has a lot of pear notes in it, but that might not be the same spirit that they use to make the New Ireland.
Okay. Sebastien, do you think the beer really made this sweeter, or am I just making this up?
No, the beer would add some caramel to it. That's for sure. Not probably not too much. It's probably not over sweet, but you can see some caramelization. Yes.
All right.
It's got to finish. If you drink a lot of cider, it's got to finish almost reminiscent of a cider, where it kind of sits back at the back of your throat with that sweetness.
Yeah, the beer need freshness. It's fresh, all fresh days.
Yeah, very fruity.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's 1 hour and 8 minutes into this. So this has been a fantastic start, but the time went by really quickly. So let's wrap this part up. Thanks to the listeners. Thank you to our panel. Thank you to the 5 of you. So Sebastien, Davin, Blair, Sheila, it's been absolute pleasure spending this time with you guys so far. We're moving our conversation from the distillery to the tasting room for a more relaxed but equally engaging conversation. Co-authors, Davin and Blair Phillips of, I'll say it all, The Definitive Guide to Canadian Distilleries, the portable expert to over 200 distilleries and the spirits they make, will, of course, be joining us. Because what better summer activity is there than traveling virtually and trying some cocktails, spending time with great people, which we have been. Join us in roughly 5 minutes, on this channel for the After Jam. And if you don't want to miss a second of the next 4, our last 4 weeks, click on the like and subscribe button. And that's it. I'm going to see you guys soon. I'm going to finish off my New Ireland, and I'll have 2 new jams and 2 cocktails. 4. I'll share them with my wife though, so don't think I'm drinking too much. It's all good. Santé, everybody.